Hello and welcome to this C63 sketch video where I want to explain the process and give you some quick tips on sketching and coloring. As the first step, I'm using a ruler to draw the three characteristic lines of the car. I'm measuring the distance between the lines with my eye, but you can also do that with a ruler on the reference picture. Now you can see that I'm using the upper line to create the side window, and this is very helpful because this line matches the bottom part of the window. Now I continue with some further line work and I complete the roof line. I also shape the middle line, which gives the car its dynamic look. As the next step, I'm using the upper line as an indication for the bonnet, and I'm starting the first lines of the windshield. The top of the windshield is on the same height as the top of the side window. After that, I'm creating the bottom of the car, and for that purpose I'm using the bottom line as an orientation. I'm adding some details around that spot which give this AMG its wide and brutal look. Then I want to create these characteristic wide fenders of the car. I saw in the reference picture that the front fender slightly touches the upper line, and therefore I'm drawing a semicircle which touches on the top of the upper line. If you have asked yourself which pencil I use on the sketch, it's a thin mechanical pencil which is not too soft, but you can also use a basic pencil. And I would always try not to create your line work with too much pressure, because then it's easier to adjust something, and I also always have to adjust something because it's never completely right after the first try. As a little information for you, this tutorial isn't supposed to be a complete guide on sketching and drawing. I just want to give some tips along the process. And my next tip is that you should always visualize how the different parts of the car are connected to each other. One example for that is that the red line connects the top of the wheel arch in the back and the bottom of the wheel arch in the front. This is how I visualize how the different parts of the car are connected to each other. And sometimes I use a ruler and I find lines like the red line to find the connections and to get an harmonic sketch at the end. Now I want to explain how I draw the most important component of the car, the wheel. We already created the wheel arches and now I want to fit in the tire. I do that with a simple square that I created with a ruler. Then I draw into that square an ellipse with 4 touch points. During the process of drawing the wheel, you can also turn the paper around your hand to get a better angle for fluent movement and line work. After adding the final details, I want to give you some tips on coloring the sketch with markers. The first step is to outline the window frame with a fine liner and a gray marker. Once this is done, I take my light blue marker to paint in the reflection of the sky into this window. I want to create a color transition, and I do that with more marker lines at the top of the window and only a few at the bottom of the window, and with a very fast movement of the marker. For the yellow paint I use 3 markers: bright yellow, darker yellow and an orange. The exact color code is in the description, and I use the bright yellow for the first layout of the paintwork. You could basically paint the whole car with the brightest yellow. The orange is very useful to mark some highlights, like the middle line, that I strengthen with this orange marker. Once your first layout is done, I use the darker yellow and I paint over it. I do that multiple times and I move my marker very fast to avoid that the marker is bleeding and to get a dynamic line work. That's how I create color transitions. Start with the brightest marker, then go with the darker one, and at the end with the darkest. I also use the darker markers to paint the edges of the car, like the bonnet and the roof, and also edges of the body kit. This is how I create the golden look that this car has. I use 3 to 4 cool gray markers for the wheels, and I use the broad tip of my Copic Classic marker. You can also use Pro markers or other models. I also want a little color transition on the tire, and I go from the dark on the bottom to my brighter cool gray on the top of the tire. Then I want to draw the rims. First step is to outline the spokes with a pen to get the rim design done. Then I color them with a bright gray marker and I strengthen the outline with a fine liner. After that, I'm adding the final details, like the disc brake and also the headlights. And for the headlights, I'm using a light blue marker to get a good reflection into the headlight. To make the sketch look sharper, I'm using a black pencil. You can also use a fine liner to strengthen some of the lines like the roof, like the middle line and other details. For the final touch I place some white highlights, which give the car a shiny and glossy look. For that purpose I use the Copic opaque white with a brush, but a cheap white Gel pen is also very suitable. I look for some areas on the edges of the car, for example on the top of the wheel arch or at the outlines of the spokes. And there I place some little spots of white color. And you finish your sketch with signing your artwork. That's it, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would really appreciate to get some feedback from you in the comments. For example, which topic should I explain more detailed in the upcoming tutorials?